Hi guys, welcome to today's YouTube video. Today's video is all about your relationship bank account. Now, what's that even mean? What it means is, how do we make deposits into our relationship instead of continuing to make withdrawals? Dr. John Gottman talks a lot about our emotional bank account and how in relationships we constantly we make these withdrawals, and withdrawals are made when maybe there's conflict or there's unresolved issues, or we feel like our needs aren't being met, or there's no real connection or positive communication in our relationship. We're making big withdrawals. And so really creating an emotional, or really I call it a relationship bank account, is how do we fill it? How do we keep it full? And I was once talking to someone about what it looks like. Let's say you're in debt and you start making payments towards those debt. Well, it gets you to a point where you're at zero, and now you have to start building in your bank account, and it's going to take time. And I get when you're at a point in your relationship where you feel like you've been doing, you're making some progress, but you still feel like there's a deficit, it can be frustrating. Remember to stay the course. So how do we really start making deposits into our relationship? I think it's doing several different things. First of all, it's creating those moments or rituals of connection. Rituals of connection, as I've discussed in many other videos, are just ways that you turn towards one another and connect to each other. And, as I've explained in other videos, Dr. Gottman's, 8 Dates, his newest book, is a great way to start, learning about each other again, asking questions, going over important topics, but really you're making a commitment to go out on a date with one another. So I think that's just an example. What I have couples do is I first have them think about, in the next 2 or 3 days, pay attention to times that you feel close or connected to one another, and let each other know what's happening in those moments where you feel connected. And so what they're doing is they're taking kind of a poll, or they're becoming observant of times that they do feel close, even if it's just for a second. And what about that moment that is creating a sense of closeness or connection to the other? So that's another idea, is, pay attention to times you do feel close, because we are so ingrained to pay attention to the negative that oftentimes we miss moments of connection. So once you have a list, even if it's just 2 or 3 things, I write it down, even if it's just a mental note, and start saying, how can I do more of this? In what ways can I connect? And don't look at it as you have to. When you feel like you have to in a relationship, that creates negative, and that goes into the negative story. So just be mindful and cautious about that. Again, it's about connection, and how are you connecting to your partner? Not, oh my gosh, I have to do this thing. And if you're at that point, of like, oh my gosh, I have to do this thing to connect to my partner, then maybe it's time that you and your partner go talk to someone, a therapist, just to kind of help you recalibrate what's happening in your relationship. So that is one thing. Another thing is the love languages. I know I did a video on the 5 love languages. In what ways do you speak love to your partner, and how do they receive it? So, being able to identify those things is also a way that you can connect, and you make those deposits into your relationship bank account. So asking each other, what are our love languages? And I'll put a link in the bottom of the comment section on accessing that book, The 5 Love Languages. It's written by Dr. Gary Chapman. It's a great book, and it's a good tool to use in your relationship. And then the other thing to keep in mind is just, how do we create rich or turning toward moments with one another? Dr. Gottman talks about these moments, and it's in our Sound Relationship House, if you remember. It's our 3rd level, if you can see it. I know it's a little bright. And in those turning toward moments are about connection too, and it's really about hearing and validating your partner. It's about understanding where they're coming from, or being able to identify what they need. So if a partner says, hey, let's go let's go bowling tonight, what they're also saying is, I want to connect with you. And you turn towards them by saying, oh yeah, that sounds great. Or if you can't do it, you still turn towards them and say, I think it would be nice for us to figure out how we can spend time together, even if we can't go bowling. So those are, I make a request and my partner turns towards me to validate, to empathize, to hear, or to plan. It's a connection. If my partner turns away, then he's not saying anything. If I say, hey, let's go bowling tonight, and he doesn't say anything, then I feel ignored or not heard. Or if he just says, leave me alone and go figure out what you're gonna do tonight, then I feel like he's turned against me, and that's, that creates a lot of distance and conflict in the relationship. So how do I turn towards my partner? When they communicate, how do I connect to them? How do I create that connection? And there are gonna be times when you miss that. You're a human being, you miss that connection. So how do you go back and repair it? So if my partner's making a request of, hey, can we watch the show on TV tonight? And I'm just doing my own thing and I don't hear him. I need to circle back around and say, hey, I know you were communicating. I was busy doing this thing. What do you need? Or how can I help? Or what were you asking? So it's my way of acknowledging that I, was distracted, and now I'm going to connect to him. So how do I turn towards him? And Dr. Gottman talks a lot about turning towards in his book, The 7 Principles to Making a Marriage Work. So that's another one, as you guys already know, that I highly recommend you do. And then another way to really kind of make sure that you're filling those, your relationship bank account, is to make sure that when conflict arises, that you still have the sense of, we're in this together. Giving each other the benefit of the doubt, as I've said in other videos, is important. And really, when there's a conflict, it's developing that plan. Do we need to take a break here because I'm flooded and overheated, and the commitment to come back to? Or how do we stay in this without putting each other down or using any of the 4 horsemen? So it's really, how do we continue to make deposits into our relationship bank account? It's really about creating those rituals of connection. Pay attention to times you feel connected, and also create some new ideas. What are some new things we can try? When we create a sense of aliveness in the relationship, it also helps with connection, and it definitely puts deposits into your account. So connection. It's turning towards one another instead of away or against. It's using the 5 love languages as a good tool to communicate and speak love to one another, besides just saying, I love you. And then the last one is to remember how you work through conflict. It's staying in it without using any of the 4 horsemen or putting the person down, or developing that plan of, I need to take a break here, and coming back to it. All right, guys, so this is a brief video on how to fill or make deposits into your relationship bank account. Have a great day.